Brian Flores will not be coming to Dallas. We'll tell you why he decided to go back to Minnesota next.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us the #1 sports podcast network. And today's episode is sponsored by PrizePicks. Download the PrizePicks app today and use promo code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Welcome back. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. He is Landon McCool. And on today's show, we're going to answer some of your Twitter questions, including should the Cowboys change the way that they are scouting players? We'll talk about the starting nickel job because that's a big topic in today's NFL. But we got some news on Wednesday, Landon. Brian Flores is returning to the Minnesota Vikings to be their defensive coordinator unless he gets a head coaching job. That's relevant to the Cowboys because there were a lot of whispers that Dallas wanted Flores to be an option to be their defensive coordinator. What do you think happened?
I mean, I think a lot of it has to do with the kind of things that we talked about when considering Brian Flores, and that is the fact that he has a system that is not easy to kind of get all the way installed and doesn't quite unfold itself to what it's supposed to be in year one, right? And so for Brian Flores, the goal is to become a head coach. And I think any potential defensive coordinator gig, and obviously it's only going to be Minnesota, would only be a stepping stone towards getting a head coaching job, right? Mm-hmm. I think Flores looked at his defense and did some self-evaluation and realized it's a very similar situation. Right now, he is a head coaching candidate. There is an opportunity that if he went somewhere to try to just go for 1 year, that year one of the install doesn't go well and his defense isn't quite as elite as it was last year, and he suddenly is not a head coaching candidate. So I think this was a smart move by Brian Flores to know that, hey, even if I don't get this head coaching job, I'm going back to a situation that's already has my defense installed. I don't have to start over from scratch in order to go out there and impress owners another year to try to get some more head coaching offers for 2027. I have opportunities here, and I think that ultimately was smart.
It's a bummer because I was hoping that Flores would at least get an interview, and it sounds like the Cowboys had a lot of interest in Flores. He just never got around to that part, and partially because we heard from Tom Pelissero on Wednesday that they actually agreed to this deal last week, but because he had interviews for head coaching jobs, it got put on hold a little bit. Now he can still go take a head coaching job if somebody offers it to him. It just always felt like a pipe dream that he would ever make his way to Dallas as the defensive coordinator. But I do appreciate that at least the Cowboys showing some kind of interest here because it's totally outside of what they're used to doing.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think, we try to measure a little bit of intent. We try to figure out exactly what they're trying to do. And I think in the same sense that we kind of knocked them for a bad process previously for not talking to enough folks, I think it's fair to give them credit for when they are interested in reaching out to the correct folks. And I think Brian Flores, to me, if he was available, was obviously a smart choice to try to get as your defensive coordinator. And I was glad that the Cowboys were open to even looking at that situation.
All right, so now that we know Flores is off the board, that was my #1 choice, and I understand that the learning curve would have been a big one. Who's at the top of your list? Is it still Jim Leonhard? Is there another candidate out there that you would like to see them either interview or potentially hire?
Yeah, I mean, I think Leonhard is still the #1 guy at this point, right? It sounds like they had some really great interviews with some of these other guys, the younger guys as well, Jones and Parker, and I think that those guys also really intrigue me because I think a lot of that is about what's going on in the interview and their excitement about what they heard from these guys kind of gets you excited about it, right? Because ultimately, like you can't fully attribute, Fangio's defense to Parker, right? Like you're kind of peeking through keyholes with some of this stuff. So I think it is nice to see that the type of guys that they're going for are again the types of guys that they said that they would go for, right? Like they wanted to go for teachers and for guys that are good communicators. And I think that, the fact that they're going after guys that, we're defensive back coaches and defensive passing game coordinators. And I think there's some proof you can make in their ability to talk to rookies, in the sense that, Parker had 2 rookies, in his camp and was able to, get some success out of that. So I do like the kind of tenor of the type of candidates that they're bringing in a lot. And it's not just like guys who watched football in 2023 whose names I know type of candidates. They're guys that you feel like are the folks that the people that are in the inside of the NFL would be whispering about as potential new guys on the scene and new candidates.
That reminds me of John Harbaugh on Wednesday talking about Rex Ryan and how much fun it would be to have Rex Ryan as their defensive coordinator. That's what you don't want, right? Like you don't want that. I'm with you on Leonhard. However, I also watched the Buffalo Bills press conference on Wednesday with Pagula, who is the owner, and Brandon Beane as the GM. Sean McDermott might be my number 1 choice right now after listening to those guys talk. And honestly, we haven't heard any rumors of the Cowboys being interested, but as these jobs start to fill up, and it sounds like we could get some news on Pittsburgh and Baltimore in the next couple of days, and McDermott's not a candidate for either of those jobs, it does make it more likely that he could take a defensive coordinator job if he wanted to coach this year. And honestly, I think he's the top guy available on the market. I know he's not young like Leonhard and some of these other guys, but he's awesome.
I think it depends for me, like, what is he looking to do here? Right? Is he looking to get back into being a head coach again? Like, he's only had one opportunity, and he was a long tenured coach. And it's hard, even though he was just fired, it's hard not to look at his head coaching tenure as a success for Buffalo, right? Sure. Like he did a great job. So if he's interested in getting back into the game, I'm only kind of mildly interested in, like, bringing him in for a 1-year wonder kind of situation. Well, I do think, go ahead. I was just going to say, I do think that he is not like Flores in the sense that I think he could come in and make a difference immediately. And like, I do think that would be a better situation than if Flores came in for 1 year and then left for head coaching. I just know that I'm not necessarily generally interested in that situation if we can avoid it,
because you're afraid that he would do a really good job, or at least an adequate job, and get another head coaching job elsewhere, right? I think the only thing I would say to that, though, Landon, is the NFL is going younger and younger, and they're really going towards the offensive side of the ball, and we're seeing like offensive head coaches being hired at a rate of like 3 to 1. That's and fair. The guys that are being hired on defense are the extremely young guys, like Jesse Minter, I think, is going to get a job.
Yeah.
I think Chris Shula from the Rams is going to get a job. Mm-hmm. McDermott, I think, is 51 or 52, so he doesn't really fit into that category. The other part of it is there are 10 job openings this year. Are we going to see another 10 open up next year? Probably not. This is probably going to be the biggest, vacancy of coaches that we've seen in a long time. So maybe there's only 6 next year. I don't know if he's guaranteed to get one of those 6 jobs either.
Well, I mean, those are all very fair points. I would argue maybe that last point a little bit. I think part of what's going on here is the timing of this whole situation, right? Like, I think people didn't necessarily expect him to be available, and they didn't necessarily. I wonder if he wouldn't have been more considered for that Giants job if he had been released a little bit earlier.
It's possible, but I don't think he was going to get like the Atlanta job or the Miami job, right? I think both those teams wanted to go somewhere younger. I think in the Atlanta's case, they wanted an offensive-minded coach. I think I'm saying, for me, it's worth the risk hiring him. And if he gets a head coaching job, he gets a head coaching job. I think he's the guy that can get you back to being a good defense the fastest.
I think that's fair. And I think that he is a guy that when he became available, certainly my eyebrow raised a little bit, because I even though he is an older guy, I mean, he is someone that we've seen can do the kind of bespoke game plans, like week to week game plans, and he can be smart about the way he's deployed. And he's, despite what being and the rest of the Bills ownership may imply, he's been able to do pretty good stuff at times with very little. And so I certainly wouldn't even rule out, even if he was just interested in doing a 1 year and done deal. I'm not like that against it. I'm just putting it as a con,
right?
But I don't disagree. Like for me, it's still Leonhard, because I think he has an opportunity and a chance to be here a little bit longer. I don't know that he's going to be a one and then jumping to a head coach situation. But McDermott is I mean, he shot all the way to number 2 as soon as he became available.
All right, let's answer some Twitter questions, including, should the Cowboys consider drafting a slot cornerback in round 1? It's a fascinating thought. We'll get to that next. This episode is brought to you by Robinhood. What if sports were traded like markets? Now you can put your sports IQ to work in real time with Robinhood prediction markets. It's not you against the house. It's you participating in a live market. You can buy or sell positions live all game long. Use your sports knowledge in the moments that matter. Robinhood prediction markets change the game. It's people moving the action. So when momentum shifts, you can move with it. I've always known the game, but I've never had a dynamic way to apply that knowledge. Now I can actually take part live in a market powered by people. You're no longer just a spectator. Play by play, you decide. Trade every play with Robinhood, now available across the U.S. Download the Robinhood app now to begin. Futures and cleared swaps trading involves significant risk and is not appropriate for everyone. Event contracts are offered by Robinhood Derivatives, LLC, a registered futures commission merchant and swap firm. This episode is brought to you by Game Time. The NFL season is in full swing. We've got 2 awesome championship matchups this weekend, and there's nothing like being at the game, the crowd noise, the energy, cheering alongside other fans. And watching at home is great, but being in the stadium just hits different. But the frustrating part is always getting tickets, between waiting in queues, dealing with logins, and watching prices change right at checkout. But that's why I use the Game Time app, which it gives the advantage back to the fans. It's the hack for unlocking amazing NFL tickets and experiences in just a few taps. I pulled up the Game Time app to take a look at some tickets for this upcoming weekend, because we have some awesome games, and you'll see some great deals for a variety of seats. Take the guesswork out of buying NFL tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONNFL. That's LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today and get back to being there live. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen every single day. If you haven't done so already, check out the new Everydayer Club. You're going to get ad-free audio to this podcast, available on all podcast apps for just $5 a month. Go to lockedoncowboys.supercast.com to learn more, or check out the link in the show notes. All right, Landon, we've got a question here from Goran, who wants to know, is the nickel cornerback position, the slot position, a first round worthy position, or is that a spot that the Cowboys should try to pay in free agency to solve?
I think it's certainly worthy of drafting in the first round. The evolution of the position has come quite a ways, right? Like it was obviously that debate of whether or not it was considered to be a starting position. And I think as time's gone on and as 11 personnel has been used more and more, nickel has become the base, right? And that's obviously been almost 10 years now, 15 years now that's been the case. And I think that as time has kind of gone on and as the evolution has kind of even gone back a little bit towards a little bit more running the football, I honestly think the position's value has only gone up. Right now, you need that kind of versatile player in the nickel to be a key cog in your run defense, to be a blitzer, to be a key communicator for your second and third levels, right? And I think that the only reason that I would say potentially that you would go the free agent route versus the draft route is because you may feel like you need a veteran guy in there and like someone who is a key communicator and who has the kind of experience and balance to their game that you need at that position. And maybe that's a tough position for a rookie to play. I also think that because the value of the position has changed so rapidly, there are a lot of quality veteran nickelbacks out there who could probably be gotten in free agency for pretty relatively cheap. So I think that there's opportunities in both free agency. I know that there's that guy from New Orleans that I liked a lot. I can't remember his name off the top of my head. I'll look it up while you're talking. But then I think there's also some guys coming out in the draft, maybe not in the first round just because of the way the slotting it looks. But there's a lot of really super quality guys who can, I've seen this year that I think they could play the position well if you need to. But either way, it's certainly the position is worth taking in the first round if you feel like there's a guy there that you want to pull the trigger on.
I know from watching like the last couple of rounds of the playoffs, and you see like what Jalen Petrie can do for the Texans, a guy that can drop into the slot. And honestly, Houston doesn't play a lot of base defense because they just leave Petrie on the field and he can come down, he can play in the box, he can make tackles, he's aggressive in the run game. It makes a big difference. Seattle's the same way with Devin Witherspoon. New England has found Marcus Jones, a guy that we like from Houston, who's the same thing. He can play every single down as a full-time slot corner. I don't think you necessarily have to draft that player in round one, but I don't think you should boost up cornerbacks who are outside cornerbacks ahead of guys who are maybe slot guys or can move around a little bit. And I think a good example, we're going to get into some more draft talk over the next couple of weeks, is Mansour Delane from LSU, who is a guy that's kind of bounced back and forth between the slot and the outside, mostly an outside corner, but I think he projects as a slot in the NFL. He's got shorter arms, and that might scare some teams away.
Yeah.
But like not me anymore, Lynn. And like, I want guys that can play and that can tackle and that are physical and don't mind sticking their nose into the run game a little bit. If that guy is, the pick at 20, I'm going to be freaking excited. Like I'm perfectly okay drafting a slot corner because you and I were talking on the phone before the show. I kind of think your slot corner gives your defense an attitude. And if you have a dog at slot corner, it seems like it kind of transcends your whole defense.
Yeah, it can be a real tone setter because it plays, it touches both passing and the run game in very heavy ways. Alontae Taylor, by the way, was the name of the
Alontae Taylor. There you go.
Yeah, and I just think that you get these guys, right, that have that kind of attitude, that have that kind of dog in them, and it permeates to the rest of you. I mean, I think Jordan Lewis is certainly
perfect example.
Like he did it for the Cowboys in a lot of ways, and I feel like the Cowboys missed that in his presence, his knowledge, his communication, but also his attitude a lot when he left this year. I think that was an underrated loss that we kind of experienced this year.
Well, and I was going to say, Deron Bland is a better player than Jordan Lewis, but having a player like Jordan Lewis in your defense is so important to kind of raising the floor, because again, you can do so many different things. And look at all the slot corners the Cowboys had to try to play this year, and it was a weakness all season long. I really hope that they spend some time and some resources addressing this position, because I think the idea of, we'll just have Bland come in there on third downs and do that, and we'll be fine. I don't think that's the right strategy.
I think you're just pigeonholing yourself a lot, right? Because I think the problem is that Bland is a really good cover guy and he can cover in the slot really well. But I don't know that he's like a super versatile blitzer or a guy that like, is like elite in the run game who will come down hard as a screen killer guy. I mean, think about again, I'm going to keep mentioning Scott from the University of Miami until the Cowboys draft him. But think about how he was playing like some of those screens and coming downhill and disrupting things. And if you have a real physical presence at that position, like we've mentioned, it not only has an effect in the run game, but teams don't throw screens on you anymore, right? Because they don't want to have to incur a loss because your veteran safety, your veteran nickel back sniffed it out and tackled it before they even got going.
And this is what the dilemma was for teams playing Houston this year. Petrie was so good at stopping screens that they stopped doing that. Well, when you have a pass rush like Will Anderson and Daniil Hunter, that means you have more true pass sets, and that's not good for an offense either. So it presents a lot of problems. So I'm 100% with you.
Yeah, I think it's an important position that, is gone from borderline starter to lesser than cornerback, to the point now where I think it should be on par. It's separate. It's a different position, but I think its value is just as equal to the outside corners, especially when you consider the fact, as we said over and over and over again, that the defensive backfield is a weak link system, and you cannot have a punching Judy that is the victim of every single time an offensive coordinator goes out there. So it's important to be strong all across the line at cornerback.
And I would argue that it might be easier to help an outside corner than it is a slot corner, right? Because some of these teams are moving their best receivers into the slot, that you need your slot guy to be able to tackle. If he's a liability, teams are just going to go after him all the time, and there's not much you can do to stop it. All right, let's talk about some scouting changes we would like to see the Cowboys make on day 3 of the NFL draft. We'll get to that next. This episode is brought to you by Indeed. If you've ever hired someone who looked good on paper but wasn't the right fit, you know how important that is. When you want candidates who truly match what you're looking for, trust Indeed sponsored jobs. Hiring Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other sites. Indeed sponsored jobs put your post at the top of the page and help you reach the right candidates faster. I know that if I ever needed to hire someone for this show, I would be very specific about what I need, real experience, and not just some resume buzzwords. So spend more time interviewing candidates who check all of the boxes with less stress, less time, and more results using Indeed sponsored jobs. And listeners of this show get a $75 sponsored job credit to help give your job the premium placement it deserves at Indeed.com/LockedOnNFL. Just go to Indeed.com/LockedOnNFL right now and support the show by saying that you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring, do it the right way with Indeed. This episode is brought to you by TurboTax. Tax season doesn't have to take over your life. This year, TurboTax is making it easier than ever to just hand things off and move on with your day. With TurboTax full service, you can have your taxes done for you by a trusted local expert, start to finish, without the stress or any of the guesswork. Instead of spending hours trying to figure out forms, you can meet with a local TurboTax expert in person or connect online. You can upload your documents, go about your day, and get updates right in the TurboTax app. It's a huge time saver. And for a limited time only, you can have your taxes done by a local TurboTax expert for just $150 all in. If a TurboTax expert didn't file for you last year, just file by February 28th. Take taxes off your plate and get back to your life. Visit TurboTax.com/local to book your appointment today. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen every single day. Landon, we've got this question from @Jones Babysitter, a longtime listener of the show.
Yeah.
He wants to know, is there a change in scouting the Cowboys could make to have more success in getting average or serviceable players later in the draft rather than striking out on tools or projections that end up being off the team in 3 or 4 years?
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, I generally don't want to prescribe going against like what you do. Like, I think if you have a thing and that's been successful for you, especially at the level of the NFL, trying to be someone other than what you are is probably not the best idea. However, because the Cowboys are kind of trying to windowize their team building a little bit, right? Like trying to hit a window. There might be something to that, right? I do feel like you're seeing, and maybe especially at some of the positions that the Cowboys need, right? It does feel like these last few years you've seen a couple teams hit on these kind of late round talent guys that aren't necessarily elite athletes, that are guys that met production metrics but maybe didn't meet athletic metrics in college, and came into the NFL and were able to kind of carve out some immediate playing time just because they were quality football players at the end of the day. I think that there's a risk there. I think that's why why the Cowboys don't do it. But I think it certainly is a strategy that can be employed, and it's something that maybe the Cowboys should consider because they're trying to accelerate things into this year.
Can we put a name to it? Because like last year, we saw the Cowboys in the 5th round. And again, it's 5th round, it's whatever. They took Jaden Blue at pick 149 because they were betting on the traits. This is somebody who said he could run a 4.2. He's got good size. In the meantime, they passed up somebody like Kyle Monangai, who went to the Bears in the 7th round because Monangai ran a poor 40, but he was a really hard runner between the tackles, physical. And Monangai ended up having the much, much better rookie season. Now, maybe in the long run, Blue figures it out. But I do wonder if this has to do with where you think the Cowboys roster is at. Because I think a couple of years ago, Landon, I only wanted them to swing for upside on day 3 because it was going to be really hard to make the roster as a serviceable guy.
Absolutely.
But I think the roster's in a different spot now where I think they need depth and they need guys that can come in and fill roles and fill backup spots. I think I would be okay taking a more reliable, safer, maybe a higher floor player versus the all upside guy now.
Yeah, I mean, like, let's put a position to it, right? Like linebacker, right? Like maybe instead of going to get the guy that ran a 4.47, but that doesn't know like what he's doing whenever he sees a running play, you go and get a guy that knows exactly what's happening on every single play. But unfortunately, he ran a 4.69 or a 4.65 in his pro day, right? So I think at certain positions, in certain spots, I think it's okay to maybe temporarily kind of just flip your thinking a little bit and go out and get. And I think an age is going to be one of these things too, right? Mm-hmm. Because there's going to be a lot of overaged players going into this class because it's the last year of the kind of COVID year kids, right? So I think that there is some inefficiency that the Cowboys could find, and it could really help them.
I'm more interested in when do the Cowboys start switching this philosophy? Is it only on day 3? Is it on day 2? Like, are they going to stop taking guys with traits who are bad football players, or do they take guys that are maybe a little bit more polished, or does it even infiltrate to round 1? And again, we can put a name to this. Akeem Mesidor from Miami. He's going to be a 25-year-old pass rusher. Do you take him in round 1 over a Keldrick Falk, who's 20 and might be the better player 3 years from now? But that doesn't really matter for the Cowboys that need a guy that can play right now.
Or cornerbacks with long arms, which is an immutable fact. Dallas Cowboys cornerbacks, there's a lot of top-end corners in this draft that aren't going to meet that height metric, that aren't going to meet that arm length metric. Would Will McClay pull the trigger on a really talented guy that doesn't fit his prototype? It's an interesting question. We'll see.
All right, that is it for today's show. We'd like to thank you for making Locked On Cowboys your first listen every single day. If you never miss an episode, the Everydayer Club is built for you. Get Locked On Cowboys ad-free, plus members-only Discord access, and so much more. Head over to lockedoncowboys.supercast.com to join the club. And for those of you on audio, we can send you the first ever 24/7 national NBA YouTube channel. And on audio, make your second listen to the Locked On NFL podcast. Follow Landon on Twitter at McCoolBCB. I'm at Marcus_Mosher, and we'll see you right back here tomorrow.